You know what I hear from sellers more than almost anything else? The right buyer just hasn't come through yet. And I get it. You've got a great home. You've put time and money into it. You believe in what you're selling. But here's what I've learned after doing this for years in Frisco and Prosper. The market is never quiet. It's talking. It's sending you a very clear signal. Most sellers just don't know how to read it. So today I'm going to let you know exactly how to interpret those market signals. So if your home has been sitting on the market with no showings, or maybe you've had a few showings but no offers, or with offers that are weak and frustratingly low, there is a very specific reason for each of those situations, and it almost always comes back to the same thing. So stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly not only what the market is telling you, but what you need to do about it. Now, before I get into the framework, I want to show you something that's been happening right now in Frisco specifically, because it matters for context. This right here is a graph showing the percentage of active Frisco listings that have taken a price reduction before going under contract. And you can see it's starting to climb. More sellers are having to cut their price before they find a buyer. That's not an indication of a crash, but it does tell you something important. A meaningful number of sellers are going to market the wrong number, and the market is correcting them. Now, here's the part that's interesting. These are national averages, and I want to be upfront about that. Here in Frisco, we're not seeing price drops this steep, but look at the direction of that line. Every time it brackets to the right, so to speak, the final sales price gets lower. Even though the percentage of drops isn't the same, the pattern holds true here in Frisco. The longer a home sits, the lower the final sales number tends to be. Not because the market has crashed, but because time works against you when the price isn't right. So the question isn't whether overpricing costs you money, because it does. The question is, how fast can you recognize what's happening, and what do the signals actually mean? So here's where it gets a little uncomfortable. When I sit down with a seller whose home isn't getting the showings they expect, or it's getting showings with no offers, the most common response I hear is some version of the same thing. The right buyers out there, they just haven't seen my house yet. And I understand why that feels true. You're not wrong. There's a buyer out there for your home. There is. There's a buyer for every home. The problem is the math. If your home is priced 8% above where the market thinks it should be, the buyer who would pay your price, that buyer exists, but they're also looking at other homes, and those other homes are priced at what the market supports. So your home doesn't even make their shortlist. You're not even in the conversation. The right buyer is coming belief is what I call a comfortable story. It lets you wait without feeling like you're making a mistake. But every single week you wait, that line chart I just showed you, well, it's moving. I've watched sellers hold on to that belief for 60, 90, even 120 days. And when they finally adjust, they end up getting far less than they would have if they'd have just listened to what the market was telling them in that first month. I've also watched sellers hear that signal early, make the adjustment, and walk away with a number they were very satisfied with because they moved before the actual listing got stale. The difference in those two scenarios wasn't the market. The difference was whether they were willing to read the signal. All right, so here's the framework. When your home goes live on the market starts sending signals fairly quickly. By around 30 days, you have enough information to know exactly what the market thinks about your price. So here's how you need to read it. Signal 1. If you have no showings or very few showings in the first 30 days, it is the clearest signal the market can send. If buyers aren't even scheduling a visit, they're rejecting your price before they ever walk through the door. They've seen your listing online. They've compared it to other options in the same price range, and they've chosen to move on from your house. When this happens, you are typically 6 to 10% above where the market thinks you should be. On a $700,000 home, that's between $42,000 and $70,000 wrong. And I realize that's not a small gap, but it's also why buyers aren't coming. Signal 2, you are getting some showings or you're getting good showing activity but no offers. That means that buyers are interested enough to come and see your home. It means that the price and the presentation got them in the door. But when they walk through the home itself and compare it to what else they're seeing or what else is available at that price, they're not writing an offer. That usually means that your pricing is 3 to 6% above where the market thinks it should be. On that same $700,000 home, that's a $21,000 to $42,000 difference. You're close enough to attract interest, but you're not close enough to close a deal. Signal 3 is when you're getting showings and you've had a couple of offers and the activity's strong, but the offers, well, they came in low. The terms weren't that good. Here's the thing. Buyers who wrote those low offers, which doesn't happen all that often, but they're not being rude. They're telling you what they think the home is worth. They're just doing the math differently than you are. When you're in this zone, you're close. You're usually only about 1 to 3% above where the market thinks you should be. The buyers are out there, but there's a gap in perception that needs to be closed before someone writes the offer that you're looking for. All right, signal 4, you've got lots of showing activity, there's strong interest, and there are competitive offers being talked about and coming in. This happens when the market is telling you that you are priced correctly. This is what happens when the home is priced where the buyers believe the value is. You don't have to hope that the right buyer shows up. The right buyer shows up because the price makes sense to them compared to everything else currently available. Now, you don't need to wait 90 days to know which category you're in. Honestly, by around day 30 in the current market, you're going to have the information. The only question becomes, are you willing to act on it? Now, I want to be real with you for a second here because I've been on both sides of this with sellers. I've had sellers that have heard every single word of this framework and it made sense to them, but they still couldn't bring themselves to adjust. Not because they didn't understand, but because the number felt personal. They had a figure in their head, and moving off of that figure, well, it felt like losing. One situation comes to mind in particular. The home sat. Weeks turned into months, and by the time we got the price to where it actually needed to be, we'd lost all of that fresh listing momentum. Buyers had questions about why the home had been sitting, and the final sales price was well below what they would have gotten if they'd have just priced correctly from the start. The right buyer never came because the right price never showed up. I've also had the exact opposite experience. A seller came to me. We walked through this exact framework before we ever went live. We priced it based upon what the market showed it would support, not what they felt emotionally good about. First week, strong showings. By week 2, we had offers. They walked away with a number they were genuinely happy with on a timeline that they controlled. Same market, same type of home, completely different outcomes. The variable was the price and the willingness to listen to what the market had to say. So here's what I want you to take away from this. If you are currently thinking about listing your home in Frisco or Prosper, or if your home is currently on the market and you're in one of those first 3 signal categories, the worst thing in the world that you can do is just wait and hope. The market's not broken. The market's not unfair. It's telling you something very specific. And the sooner you listen, the better your outcome is going to be. The sellers who do best in this market, they're not the ones that get lucky. They're the ones who priced with a clear head, watched the signals, and adjusted when the market asked them to. So if you're trying to figure out where your home potentially stands in this market, that's exactly the type of conversation I have with sellers before we ever put a sign in the yard. No pressure, just a clear look at the numbers and getting a better idea of what the market's telling us. In the description below, you're going to find a link to my calendar, and I invite you to go ahead and schedule a free 30-minute consultation call with me where we can go over all of this information. So hopefully you found this video useful, and if you have, I invite you to stick around because the video coming up next goes into why some homes here in Frisco sell 4 times faster than other ones. So thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in that next video.